No worries. All right. Well, good evening, and welcome to the City of Kyle. And my name is Vanessa Westbrook. I am the chair of the Arts and Cultural Commission, which is a new commission with the City of Kyle. This evening, we are going to focus on another Peace and Progress dialogue with citizens from the City of Kyle, Texas. During this time, we will have questions as well as discussion on some of the events and just encounters in the City of Kyle that we have all been exposed to. And I think that you will enjoy this very candid, open, fun dialogue among the 7 members on our dais that we're going to have here this evening. I'm going to start off by introducing our panel. And on our panel, we have Ms. Kahlen Barnes. Kahlen, would you wave at everyone? Kahlen is a senior at Lehman High School. And if I'm not mistaken, she's on the Strutters. She's a Strutter, very nice talent, if I might add. And she will be graduating this spring. Next, we have Ms. Wilma Javey. Ms. Wilma is the former Equal Employment Opportunity Commission from Cincinnati, Ohio. She was the director there. Ms. Wilma, if you wave at everybody. Thank you, ma'am. All right. We also have Reverend Kenneth Bell. And Reverend Bell is no stranger to the members and citizens of Kyle. He is a chaplain at the Central Texas AMVET Post 115, and we've seen him around on numerous occasions giving us his blessings at various events around the city. We also have Ruben Castaneda. Thank you, Ruben. And Ruben is a Travis County Juvenile Public Defender. He is a citizen here and has been a citizen here for quite a while now. I think Ruben and I go back a long ways. We have Ms. April Barnes. And Ms. April is the director of the University Leadership Network at the University of Texas at Austin, also a citizen of Kyle. We have Dr. Mark Trahan. Mark is an associate professor at the School of Social Work at Texas State University. Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Ms. Rebecca Marquez. And Ms. Rebecca, also a senior at Lehman High School, who will be graduating this spring. So welcome, everybody. And I'd also like to please and thank our distinguished audience who's sitting right now listening and will be participating virtually with us as we move through this panel discussion. So audience, thank you for coming in tonight. And audience online, thank you for also joining us this evening and participating as we move through the process of another Peace and Progress Black History Month. This is the 4th one we've had, beginning with our first one, which is in 2020. And so looking forward to continuing these Peace and Progress dialogues over the next years. We have 3 of them actually planned this year. This is the first of 2023. We'll have another one in June, and then another one about late October, early September. Late September, early October. Now, before we get started, a couple of things that I want everybody to be aware of. We're going to be asking some questions to the panelists. And when the panelists are given a question, each of them has a paddle. And the paddle has a front and a back side. Whichever side you decide is the front or the back is totally up to you. On one side, it says, I choose to speak. So a question will be read to our panel, and they will have the option of saying, yes, I'd like to speak to that question, or they can say, I choose to listen and not participate in the active dialogue. However, they do have the option, if by some chance they would like to add something at the end, they could just signal me with their paddle. This is a commemorative paddle that we're giving everyone on the dais and saying thank you for joining us for this evening. It actually says Dialogue for Peace and Progress 2023 Black History Month. So panelists, thank you again for joining us. As we get started, the idea is that we're talking about Black History Month. And I was just telling the panelists earlier that I didn't think it was important to talk about the history of Black history. How did it come to be? And then I was involved in a conversation about a week or so ago at a museum conference. And someone said, as a part of the discussion, well, I don't understand why Black History Month is celebrated in February, the shortest month of the year. Now, what's that all about? And I was like, oh, okay, well, perhaps I should give some context to that. So in essence, in February, all the way back until about 1865, African Americans in this country celebrated February for two reasons. It was Abraham Lincoln's birthday month, as well as Frederick Douglass' birthday month. So they were being celebrated. So when the idea of celebrating Black History Month came to be, and it wasn't Black History Month, it was actually called Negro History Week as it started out. It was also decided it was going to be done during the month of February. African Americans were already used to having a celebration in regards to Douglass as well as Lincoln. So taking a month that was already being celebrated made it that much easier for people to be able to remember. So it wasn't about the lower number of days in the month, but it was a familiar month of celebration among African Americans in the United States. Now, as we engaged in that conversation with my colleagues, and some of them said, so we only get to celebrate Black History Month just in February and no other time? And I jumped in and said, well, I don't think so. I think when we celebrate Women's History Month, we're talking about African Americans. When we're talking about various things that are going on throughout the United States and various celebrations, space programs, whatever it happened to be, we're talking about African Americans. But this is the one time that everybody kind of joins forces together to put out a lot of information and give us a blitz of some of the things that African Americans have contributed to in our society. So I do not believe that this is the sole month that this happens, but it is a big month that it happens. And how do we find out about some of hidden figures and people in political arenas and people who have been inventors and engineers here, who then we go on to celebrate a little bit later on, say during the space program or doing a Veterans Day. So all of these to me are connected, but it kind of starts with February and this idea of Black History Month. How much do you know? And you can always learn more. That's how I look at Black History Month. All right, so just wanted to get that out there as we talked about this idea of Black History Month and its connection to February. So I'm going to start off by saying, while you were listening earlier before we got started, there were a couple of facts that we had on the screen that you could see from home as well here in the audience. And these facts we wanted to put up because it was a collection of research that says, here's what this is. And I do believe that they all are connected. One of them is in reference to what's a stereotype? Another one is in reference to what do we mean by this idea of race, and has it always been around? There's another one that focuses on the idea of melanin and how melanin, which is a chemical in the skin, determines skin color, and how that chemical is a lot or not a lot in your skin depends on where your ancestors were and how much sun they were exposed to. So, a few facts that we had, and we'll bring those back up again before we end. So, panelists, I am going to go ahead and start with the first question. And that first question is, why celebrate Black History Month in the 21st century, i.e., 2023 and beyond? Again, the question is, why celebrate Black History Month in the 21st century, such as now, 2023 and beyond? If you're interested in speaking, please raise your paddle. All righty. We have a full house. Yay! All right, so I am going to start with Reverend Bell.
Okay, I think it's very important that we still celebrate Black history in the 21st century for the simple reason. Every day is a challenge to not just Black peoples, all colored peoples. Any different race, every day is a challenge. And I think if we celebrate this and bring it to the forefront of everybody's mind that each and every one of us is different in some way, but some of us needs to bring that attention back to the top to let everyone know that we are a force that's growing and coming in the changing times, and the 21st century is no different than it's been in the past. In the past, I say we have came a long ways. I'm 72 years old. I can tell you about how that long ways is. So I think it's something that needs to carry on from this day forward as long as I and most anyone in this room live, because it keeps us aware of the situation which we live in every day.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Miss Rebecca.
It's important to celebrate Black history because it's a way to celebrate the achievements African Americans have accomplished despite the history of racism and oppression. It's important to celebrate the rise of Black businesses and arts and the literatures that can and will influence our future. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Miss Wilma.
It's important to celebrate it because the reason it was created by Mr. Woodson, these things still apply today. He wanted us to celebrate the African American achievements, to make them known. And so many of African American achievements in America are still unknown because they're not being taught. And the only time most people hear about those achievements, as you said, was during African American History Month, when we pretty much try to get everything that we can out. And especially now, with the culture now, where some people are trying to suppress our history, to pretend that slavery did not happen, that a group of our people weren't enslaved. They're wanting to call it things other than enslavement, such as some people in Texas were trying to get it called involuntary relocation, as if, they brought us here, we could have left. So it's always important that we put as much information out about African American achievements as we can, because I think the more people know about each other, as Reverend Bill said, the more we understand that we're all the same. I mean, the only difference is our skin color. Everything else about us, we all have the same origins, we all have the same, we all have a mind. So they need to understand, other people need to understand that we have and their history is African American history also.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. All right. Miss Kayla?
I think it's important to celebrate Black history because it's an opportunity for everyone to learn about where we come from. Because, like she said, Black culture is American culture, and I think that we still have so much history behind that we're still learning about, and we continue to make history. So I think it should be continued to be celebrated every single year, every single day, because again, we're going through challenges every single day, and we're making history. So I think that we should continue to celebrate it. It's a beautiful thing. So.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. All righty. Ruben?
Yes, Dr. Westbrook, thank you. Well, my short answer is why should we celebrate is because we must. If we want to live up to the ideals that this country says that it has, then we must celebrate Black History Month and celebrate it all year. It's good to celebrate, the ones we always talk about, MLK, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, all wonderful, wonderful humans who did a lot for us. We also need to celebrate those who are less known. For example, an enslaved man, I may not pronounce it right, Onesimus was an enslaved man in the early 18th century who brought the method of inoculation to this country, the same method that George Washington used when he inoculated his troops during the Revolutionary War. But I would challenge people to take it a step further. We need to celebrate the untold, the millions of enslaved people who toiled, who put in their work. They were not involuntarily relocated, they were enslaved. The reason is our country's wealth. This is the wealthiest country in the world. Our country's wealth is based in large part on the stolen labor of these enslaved Africans. One thing is, as I've been doing research over the years, it has kind of astounded me is the value, the dollar value of enslaved people in the 19th century was more than the entire amount that the U.S. government spent, more than the value of the land. And it wasn't just the Southerners who benefited. You think about the textile industry in the Northeast, cotton. Who picked the cotton? The prosperity that Americans have now is built in large part on the backs of the enslaved Africans, and we need to recognize and appreciate that in addition to celebrating it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Mark.
Well, I did put listen, but I am going to speak up.
Did you? Okay.
So for me, I think that it's about taking the time to reflect and to look at where we are, how we support and affirm, and how we lift up our Black leaders, and also how we invest in our community and how we build the future of what social justice, economic justice look like in our communities. So I think it's a chance to sit back, educate, take a look, reflect, and really think about where we are now and where we're headed. I tend to be somebody that thinks more futuristically, and so I'm oftentimes more considering what does the present moment mean in terms of the future. Where are we at now and where are we headed? So for me, it's an opportunity to really sit and think about what does this mean to me? What does the history mean to me? But what does it mean to me in terms of where we're going? What's the focus? What's the goal here? Why are we? And so it's about celebrating, and it's also about reflecting and taking a look at where do we want to be? Where are we headed?
Thank you. All right, Miss April.
All right, well, sometimes going last is not easy, right? Because we have a lot of great dialogue and responses from our panelists, but this is a dialogue, right?
Absolutely.
Right, so I'm going to go ahead and preface before I say anything. When I ask you questions, please respond. Like, nod your head, say yes or no. You know, that's okay too. So I'm going to take my response in a little bit of a different direction. Yes, we must celebrate, Black History Month. We have to do it because it's not always celebrated. But I think the biggest reason is because not only do we want to reflect and look back, but it's also motivational. History is being made every day, and sometimes it's empowering to look back and to reflect at what you're capable of, because schools don't always tell you, the media doesn't always tell you, your friends don't always tell you, but we can pull that motivation by looking, back at those whose shoulders we stand upon, by seeing it all the time, to know that Black history is not just something that was in the 1800s, or as my kids would say, like the 1900s. I know it sounds like a long time ago. But, history is yesterday, and some of the things that we are doing now are what they're going to talk about later on. So I look at it as an opportunity to learn and to grow, and not only just to be motivated myself, but also to motivate others.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. All righty. So again, as we go back and look at some of the facts that were presented before we got started. There was something on the monitor about the definition of what critical race theory is. Now, we're not going to necessarily get into that topic, but I did want to put some information up, and this came from the Legal Defense Fund in regards to critical race theory. It is something that we hear thrown around a whole lot, and as an educator, I'm saying, okay, y'all don't get it. That's not what that means. And so it's been taken so much out of context and used so negatively that I believe someone should just say, hold on a minute, what is critical race theory? And in essence, that is a very short definition that we put up on the screen for you to be able to observe. The other thing that has come forth is a project that has also gotten a lot of negative press, the 1619 Project. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the 1619 Project is an initiative. It was actually an article that was written by a journalist researcher who talked about the first Africans who came to this country enslaved was in 1619 and how it went from then on. So again, I hope that you have a pencil wherever you may be and you're going to jot down 1619 Project and you're going to look it up and go find out some more information about it and see exactly what is this big discussion that's going on while either one of these things are so negative. Because the question is, are they negative or are they just giving us a little bit more of information? All right. Rachel, are we ready to do a Menti? Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're now going to have what's called a Mentimeter question. And the question is going to come up in just a second on your screen where you can go to the website, which is menti.com, and you're going to enter that code. And then there is a question that we would like for you to give us a response to. The question is, when celebrating the history of African Americans, what has been your biggest inspiration as a member of the audience, whether you're online or you're sitting here with us today? And we'd love to see some of your responses to our Menti question. In the meantime, while we're waiting on answers to that question from our audience, another fact that we had that ran across the screen before we got started was the idea about genetics. People are 99.9% similar. That's almost 100%. Genetic makeup makes people much more similar to each other than not. And I think it was Miss Wilma who referred to us and said that everybody pretty much has the same thing. You got organs, you got lungs, you have to breathe air, you have to eat food. There's way more that's in common with everybody than not in common, no matter where you are in the world. But that's not how things work, if we want to be honest about it. For some reason, there seems to be this understanding that people are very, very different. And maybe the clothes that they wear or the language that they speak, but in essence, everybody is the same. So that idea about 99.9% similar from a genetic code makeup. Now, that's a scientific perspective that I think we want to think about here in the audience as well as online. So let's see, we have 2 answers thus far. We're going to come back to that. Keep those answers coming on the Mentimeter, but I'm going to ask our panelists another question, and I will read the question and then you decide whether or not you want to listen or whether you want to participate. So, question number 2. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History has chosen the theme Black Resistance for celebrating Black History Month in 2023. What comes to mind for you as you think about the theme for this year? Now, let me add that every year, this particular association picks something, a specific designation of celebrating the year, a focus. It's been mental health, it's been military, it's been of a range of things. And you can actually go to their website and look at the years of different themes that they've selected. So this year, the theme is resistance, Black resistance. Again, the question is, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History has chosen the theme Black Resistance for celebrating Black History Month 2023. What comes to mind as you think about this theme for this year? Anybody interested in speaking? Okay, all right. Okay, let's start with Ms. Kayla. Why don't you kick it off for us?
Okay. The theme this year, Black Resistance, to me, it means like we're not going back in time. We're here holding our own, and the only way to move is forward. So we are resisting to resort back to what things used to be in the past, because segregation was a super big thing, and there's slavery, and every day we fight for equality and just to be like just like everybody else. So I think resistance, we're resisting to go back to what it was, because the only way to go is forward. And I think that's a really big deal, because we don't want to dilute the progress that we've already made, and I think the only way to go is to grow from here. So I think the only way to go is forward, and we just need it. We're just fighting every day, and we're just resisting to fall back into the background, and we're here to stand up and hold our own. So
Okay,
that's my
thank
opinion.
you. Thank you. All righty then. Ms. Wilma.
When I read the theme, it made me think about how strong African Americans are, and how long we've been fighting to receive freedom and equal treatment. And I thought about how resistance started even when we were first placed on the ship, because some of the enslaved people were so opposed to it, to the oppression, didn't want to accept the oppression, that they would just jump off. They'd rather jump into the ocean and drown rather than be enslaved. And even the ones who were forced to come here, they resisted by, there were uprisings, they escaped, and some women made the ultimate resistance. They even took the life of their newborns so they wouldn't be born into slavery. And then when we went into emancipation, there, there was resistance in that they would move. They would just leave the South and went west. So there were mass exoduses and resistance of the treatment that they were receiving. And in Jim Crow, you had the northern migration. And then pre-Civil War, we had sit-ins, walk-ins, boycotts, all of those resisting to get the freedoms that we now have, although there seems to be an effort to take some of those freedoms away. So that says we have to continue to resist oppressive behavior, as I said before. Now about wanting to not call being enslaved, but involuntary relocation, which is just crazy. And then you have these people who don't want to teach African American history because they say it makes white children feel bad about themselves. But that doesn't consider that not teaching African American children about their history makes them feel bad about themselves. So it has to be equal, and it's history. It is not trying to indoctrinate somebody about something. It is simply telling people what has happened and having them accept that it's happened, and we do things to make sure that it doesn't reoccur. And in some ways, we are going backwards. I mean, we've pretty much lost the Voting Rights Act. People are being killed for no reason. It seems to be that there's open war on people of color, and that has to be stopped. And the only way to stop it is to resist it the way we did before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which made most of that stuff legal. So that just tells us we have to keep resisting, and this is a good topic for this particular point in time.
When I first heard that question, the first thing that came to mind was also resilience. Um, in the face of generational history of slavery and lynching and the constant experiences, regular experiences, everyday experiences of implicit bias and discrimination and prejudice, to me, is when we think of it in terms of a collection of these experiences, is incredibly, incredibly difficult to navigate. So for me, it's about the resilience of the African American community, despite all of that, continuing to stand back up and say, no, we're going to keep moving forward. And so when I think of resistance, I think of avoiding retreating and turning inward. And I think of maintaining that outward focus to here we are, we're going to continue to move forward. And so I think to me, resilience is a piece that requires that we all as a community take a look at the ways that we can create support and care and investment in order to nurture the community so it can thrive. And so there is a part that we all have to play in this. It's not individual. It's about our communities and about how we support that process in the midst of those challenges. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, Reverend Bill.
You know, just before we got started, I was talking to Miss Wilma, and she's from up north, and myself being from down south. Between the two of us, we had very different ideas about certain things. And this question brings up those things to me. I lived through some of the things that she didn't even think existed. She thought it was just something that they talked about. I lived through those things. The segregation of white water fountains, black only, colored restrooms, black restrooms, going to the back of the bus. Her and I was having that dialogue about that. And she just could not relate to, that's what we were doing down here in South, and she was in Ohio and had never heard of what we was talking about happening down here. She thought it was a forest. So black resistance is something that we need to keep going for the simple reason we're not going nowhere. We will be here. So with that, I say we need to do every February and every month of the year like it's Black History. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right. Mr. Ruben.
Make sure my microphone is on. One of an iconic image that I have, and I might be telling myself about my age, is the 1968 Olympics. Tommy Smith and John Carlos standing on the medal podium, holding their fist up, gloved. That is an act of passive resistance, but it's resistance nonetheless. Makes me think of what resistance looks like today. There's all kinds of resistance. And I didn't think I'd be saying something like this even as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, but one of the ways we can resist today, read a book, share a book. Because the powers that be, they're not taking any days off. They are not only trying to make it illegal, they are making it illegal. A law that went into effect a little over a year ago here in Texas, talking about what teachers can and cannot teach about founding of this country in terms of slavery. It says, with respect to their relationship to American values, teachers, let me say this right. With respect to the relationship to American values, slavery and racism are anything other than deviations from, betrayals of, or failures to live up to authentic founding principle of the United States, which include liberty and equality. So they want the teachers to teach that slavery and racism are aberrations. They are not. You look at your history, and Dr. Westbrook, you're a historian, you know all this. If you look at the Constitution of the Republic of Texas, when this state was a sovereign nation, it banned black people from living here. Even the slave owners could not emancipate their own slaves without consent of Congress. That is foundational to Texas, and that needs to be taught. That is history. And what we are experiencing now is a whitewashing, another attempt to whitewash the history. And so the best way to engage in resistance is to read a book, share a book, tell the truth.
Thank you. All right, very, very interesting perspectives from everyone in regards to this idea of black resistance. All right, I'm going to take a look at the Mentee answers. Again, the question was, when celebrating the history of African Americans, what has been your biggest inspiration? And some of the things that were said are, my daughter's teaching her about what was before, where we are now, and where we can go. Okay? Another inspiration, just the one word of progress. Another one says, the message of hope, faith, and perseverance teaches that we too can overcome together and make a difference. One more, I enjoy learning about Black history because it is incredibly inspiring. As a person who has a lot of personal struggles, the resilience of Black people has given me the courage and the hope to hold on to and preserve myself when I feel hopeless. Okay, all right, very good, very good. All right, we'll have a couple of more questions that will come up for our audience to participate in. We are now going to go to question number 3. And panelists, question number 3. What is your memory of learning about Black history or African Americans in history in an academic setting? Again, what is your memory of learning about Black history or African Americans in history in an academic setting? Who would like to speak? Okay, thank you. All right, then we are going to start with Miss Rebecca.
For me, when I was learning about Black history, I didn't know much about it until maybe about middle school. And it was a big eye-opener for me, and I learned a lot of new things from Rosa Parks to MLK to Harriet Tubman to all those important historical figures that have came to our lives. I've learned a lot, and I've learned that African Americans have suffered, but I don't want to put it as suffered either. They have evolved, and they're growing, and we're all learning to be equal. And from this day on, I hope to see that we can all be equal from this. And I remember learning about Rosa Parks and how she sat in the front of the bus and was denied that. And experiences like that have really opened my eyes. And I've learned that African Americans, the skin color has affected many lives. And it's a sad truth. And I really hope to see that the person's color does not depend on, it doesn't matter. A person's color doesn't matter whatsoever. And I just hope that we can all see it past that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All righty, let's see. Miss April, your hand was up, right? Okay.
It was. I'm probably going to completely date myself by saying this, but some of you may remember in the audience or online. But my earliest memory of learning about Black history was those little black silhouettes that we would cut out and paste onto construction paper. And if you haven't seen it, let me tell you, you must. It's something special. But that was it, and that's what we did. And that was probably around elementary school or so. And then as we started getting to middle school, again, you learned about the big three: MLK, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, right? That was about it. And then there was usually one wonderful, lovely Black teacher from me. It was Miss Angela Regans. If you're watching, anybody knows her, tag her, who would do like a Black history program, right? Where you started to learn more about, some of the lesser known historical figures. And pretty much, sadly to say, once I hit high school, it kind of stopped. It kind of started to be not a thing. I don't know if they thought we had learned all that we could, or maybe it was just growing up where I did in Longview, Texas. It wasn't anything that they necessarily wanted to highlight. But I do remember it being extremely disappointing. Not just because it stopped, but also because it did not evolve. All we learned about was people, and we didn't even learn about it from our own perspective. It goes back to the whitewashing. It was somebody else telling our story and how we should feel about it, or how we should not feel about it. And that was horribly discouraging. And then even when you went to college, unless you enrolled in a specific course for African American Studies, which did not exist necessarily when I was in college. Oh, Lord, yes, I'm dating myself. It wasn't necessarily a thing. And so you had to join, student organizations that may learn. And we started to learn for ourselves and read some books, as Ruben mentioned, to try to piece it all together and what it meant to us. And then from having now my own children and seeing what they're going through or learning or not learning in this particular system is very disheartening on a lot of different levels. So what I would like to see is, Black history treated as what it is, which is history. It is a part of American history. Yes, highlighted in February, but highlighted in January, highlighted in May, because it is what it is. And until we make it mainstream and not something that's just marginalized, I think it's going to continue to do so. So I'm not going to take up 30 minutes. So that's all I'm going to say. But I hope you all have the same experiences, and I hope that people hear that and work to change it, not only here in Kyle, but in Texas as a whole.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Ruben? No, it wasn't? Okay. Miss Wilma.
I'm going to date myself too, because I think I have an older date than April. But I was up north, as the Reverend said, but it wasn't taught there either. And I did not have any African American history talk except the stuff that my mother and them talked about at home until high school. And then, I don't know if you would consider this academic, but the person who was head of the Black Panthers in Cleveland moved across the street from me. So I started talking to him and his wife and the people who would come. And then they had a headquarters near the library in our neighborhood. So then I would go to the library, tell my mother that, but I would go to the headquarters and they taught me about African American history. And as they said, not just the big three. You learned about Crispus Attucks. You learned about all the African American units that fought in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. They taught you about the African American units in the Civil War, and there were a lot more than they talk about in the history books. They talked about the first heart transplant was by an African American man. It was all sorts of things that I learned that I would not have learned had I not gone there. And the same, we had African American history course when I went to college, and I took it, but they taught about what happened after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Like, that's when our history started.
If it hadn't been for the Black Panthers, I would not know as much about Black history as I do know.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Bell.
Hey, I'm weighing in because, you know, I go way back to remember. I attended a all-black elementary school, junior high school, and high school. My elementary school was named Christopher Adams. So I lived what is history nowadays. At that day and time, I didn't know it was. But we had a lot of things that we taught in school at that time, we were taught in schools at that time, which was Negro history, not Black history. It was Negro history. Mm-hmm. And they took a week teaching us about Christopher Adams and teaching us about Ebony Worthing and teaching us about Jack Yates. I was in Houston, Texas during the time of the Black Uprising, Huey Newton and the Black Panthers. Mm-hmm. And during that time period, we saw a lot of changes take place because of those arising at Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. It made me, going into the military, a different person that knew that I had rights that I didn't know I had as a young teenager in Houston before I went in the military. I went in the military at 18 years old. I thought going in the military would have been a freedom of life that I wouldn't have to deal with the prejudice that I had saw growing up. It was live and well in the military also. So therefore, we have come a long ways. We have a long ways to still go. And I encourage everyone to stay focused, stay on the path. We will get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I get everybody? Mark.
I wanted to mention that I think I had 3 schools, different schools, a private school, a public school, and a magnet school that I went to. And the only time that I was taught African-American history was in my senior, junior history class with a gentleman named Wendell Zartman, who was a fantastic history teacher. But a lot of the history that I have learned has come by my own seeking out, by my own interest. And I wanted to speak to a concept that I think is really important around this, and that is the idea around empathy. I teach social workers empathy, and empathy is your ability to be able to listen and put yourself in somebody else's shoes, both in terms of your thinking, so cognitively, so you're thinking you can see what they're saying, but you can also have a sense of what they might be feeling as a part of that as well. You have a sense of what it must be like to be in that circumstance. And empathy for us as a culture is actually going down, just generally in our society, in our culture. We are less likely to want to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and really listen from their perspective about their experience. And in order for us to really tell stories and listen to stories and hear the experience of those stories, we first have to be curious and we have to be willing to engage on some level of empathy to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to be able to listen about what it's like for them. So I bring up the idea of empathy in the sense that when I see that there's closure around these stories, and that's what history is, it's a story. When there is a perspective that I take that says, these stories are the stories that we're going to talk about, but I'm not going to talk about these stories. What we're saying is, I don't want to put myself in your shoes. I don't want to listen to what you have to say. And what that means is that I'm willing to discount your story for the sake of holding on to mine. And what I would encourage us to consider is that we don't have to discount other people's stories to listen to their experiences. And we don't have to discount our story in order to be available to theirs. We can be listeners and hold a story and listen to other stories, and all of it can still be true. So when I hear a limitation on these are the kind of history books that we're going to introduce, or this is the education, those are all voices and all stories. And it's okay for us to have all the stories to understand what's happening in a historical context so that we can put ourselves in each other's shoes. It's a missing ingredient that I think that we can all work on because it's a skill that you can actually work on it. It's not something inherent in your personality. You can actually grow your empathy. There's a researcher from Stanford that does a lot of research on empathy and shows that you can actually build it. If you work hard to listen and to put yourself in other people's shoes, you actually can build your sense of empathy. So it's not something we lack. It's something we have to work on. And that's what I want to encourage us to do, is consider how we're putting ourselves out there to listen, be curious, and put ourselves in other people's shoes to listen. So.
Thank you. All right. Very good perspective, the idea of empathy. One of the things I wanted to add about that, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Kayla, go ahead. I know it's missing somebody.
Okay, my experience with learning about Black history, it hasn't been as authentic as I want it to be. Like, I don't remember learning much about it in middle school or elementary for that matter. I do remember learning about it, but it wasn't as put into depth with it. And we had like a couple Black History Month programs and assemblies, and even barely in high school, like this year was our only second year of having a Black History Month program. I'm like, why is this only our second? Like last year was our very first one. I'm like, why hasn't this been around more? So I thank Ms. Moore for really like being so passionate about it, because it helped me to like have that sense of pride in like my culture, because it's hard to be passionate about something and be so excited about something when you're the only one, you know, that can really like experience that. Because I'll be sitting in a classroom and like we're learning about slavery and racism and all this stuff, and there's no one I can really like relate to when like thinking about that. So Miss Moore, thank you, Miss Moore. She really brought that sense of pride out of me to learn about my culture more and have that excitement when it comes to learning about it. And I think that even last year, like there were so many like new people that I learned about that I never knew about before. And I'm like, there's so many stories to uncover, and there's so many people that have done amazing things that I'm just barely learning about now. So I think that being in school, that we should definitely go into more depth with Black history, because it's a part of America and it's a part of something special that we just really need to go into more. Like, I think that there's so much ground to cover with it, and it's not appreciated enough. And I don't think people in school that aren't part of like the Black community really understand that, and they just kind of grasp it here and there. But there's just so much that they don't understand and don't realize that we have to deal with. So I just wish there was more Black history incorporated into academics, and that there should be a broader spectrum of learning about it. And yeah, that's pretty much my opinion.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Very interesting perspective from a perspective of someone who is in a public setting right now in their experience with this idea of what's happening with Black history doing in an academic setting. Thank you very much, Ms. Kayla. All righty. So I am going to put up another Mentimeter question for our audience to participate in. And it's going to come up on the screen just a second. All right, so this one says, okay, all right, so again, the Mentimeter.com, and then enter the code if you've just joined us and you would like to answer this question, and then your question, the answer to your question will appear up on the screen. The question is from Mentimeter: viewing the definition of stereotyping, what assumption about you was made based on your appearance that turned out wrong? And I am going to read to you the definition of stereotype that we had at the beginning of the program. A stereotype is a general idea or belief about a group that is not based on facts. Stereotypes make it seem like everyone of the same group is the same. Stereotypes are typically not true. So, with that definition, the question is, looking at that definition, viewing the definition of stereotyping, what assumption about you was made based on your appearance that turned out wrong? And we will allow our audience to have a minute to put some answers up for that. And while that's going on, I am going to bring the next question up to our panelists. Panelists, if you could go back in time and meet a Black historical figure, who would he or she be and why? Now, you may say, how far back in time? And my answer to that, the past was 10 minutes ago. So how about that as a frame of reference? All right, if you could go back and meet someone in time, a Black historical figure, who would he or she be and why? And I'm hoping I can actually get everybody on the panel to say, yes, I'd like to answer that question. So, I'm guessing speak up, speak up. Everybody's going to speak up, all right. Good deal. I'm going to start with Miss April.
You will start with me. And I will say I have about 10 different answers because,
You get to pick one.
yeah, oh, okay. Okay. If I'm going to pick one, I am going to go with Nat Turner
Okay.
for a few different reasons. One, again, I like to hear it from his own perspective, not the perspective that we were taught. You know, what led you to this movement? How did you organize without social media and like the internet or mail? Or, you know, all of these things that, you know, we have the convenience of today. What gave you that conviction? You know, how brave were you, you know, to try to incite a rebellion that, at least in America, we had not seen at that time? You know, what inspiration did you pull from? Because that's another thing, you know, with Black history. You know, our history did not start with slavery, you know, or in this country, or, you know, what is Black? You know, we don't ever even talk about our Afro-Latino. But anyway, whole nother subject.
Yeah.
So if I had to choose one today, at this moment, it would be Nat Turner for those reasons.
Okay, thank you very much. Reverend Bill?
I'll step out on that one.
Okay.
Go back so far. So I'm listening to this kind of.
All right, we're going to call you at the end then.
I'll have one.
Okay, sounds good. Ruben?
Yeah, that's I also had a whole bunch that I would like to talk about, and you know, we only have about 30 more minutes. But one person I would like to go back in history, late 1950s, early 1960s, is John Lewis. He recently passed away. It amazes me. This young man, he was in his early 20s, teenager, early 20s, and he is risking his life. He is fighting for the rights of African Americans, the right to vote, the right to basically be served the same as white people. He was part of the Freedom Riders. He was beaten up. The buses that the Freedom Riders were riding in were bombed. He participated in the march in Selma, and he suffered a fractured skull. He's barely 20 years old, in his early 20s, hasn't even lived yet. And he knows every time he jumps on a bus to take a freedom ride, he knows every time he's marching that he is subject to being killed, and there were many times he almost was. In spite of that, he continued on. He became a representative from Georgia, and everything I've read about him, every video clip I've seen about him, and I might be a little biased because he gave a speech about public defenders, praising public defenders, and I am one. But he seemed so joyful in the fight. First of all, I don't know many people. I know I would not have had the courage in my early 20s to risk my life. And second, if I had gone through what he had gone through, I would probably be bitter and cynical. But no, he lived a full life and he did a whole lot of good. And so I would like to meet him as a young man to see what gave him such courage.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All righty, I'm gonna go, Miss Rebecca.
For me, I don't want to go like that back, but for me, I would say Michelle Obama.
Okay,
And I say Michelle Obama because she was the first lady and the first Black African American woman first lady, and she can inspire many young women to be like her and to not be afraid. She did like a lot of nutritional stuff, a lot for the schools. She very inspirational for young women, and I feel like a lot of women can use her to be like an inspiration for us to go on and about and not just to be scared because of the race or gender or anything. And that plays a big factor because I know a lot of women, they don't think that they can because they're a woman and it's a man's job or something, you know, but we can and we will, and she showed us that. So yeah.
okay, thank you. And I'm gonna go next to Miss Kayla.
This is kind of going really far back. I would say I would definitely want to meet Harriet Tubman because she's just been a hero in my eyes since like the 3rd grade. I remember doing a little project on her. I made like a life-size version of her. But anyways, just the fact that like she did all that, like not only is she Black, but she's also a woman. Like people don't understand that being Black and being a woman is like pretty hard to deal with. But in itself, like she's just so brave and she's so fearless, and she was able to escape the worst time of her life, and then she even came back. Like she had every right to be selfish and like go get the life she wanted, go make it better for herself, but she didn't. She decided to go back and help and change so many people's lives, and I think that's just something to really honor because people can be so like, you know, people care about themselves and they want things to be better for them, but when you care about other people and you want to help other people, it's just really inspiring. So she's just amazing, and she's just a hero, and I just love to like meet her face to face. I know I can't, but if I could, I would definitely choose Harriet Tubman.
Okay, thank you. All righty, Mark.
Oh, Dr. Westbrook, this is such a tough question.
Oh, Dr. Brand, come on.
You know, I thought we received these questions in advance, so I thought about this question before I got here, right? And you know, there were a couple of people that came to mind, like Thurgood Marshall came to mind, and John Lewis came to mind, and I would just be blown away to sit down with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, that, right, surreal. But I was thinking about this, and I wanted to turn this question upended, and I wanted to talk about the fact that I think it's easy to take a look at people of the past and think about what they did in their time that was historic and monumental. But I wanted to highlight some people that I think are doing that today, like right here in Hays County. And these are my heroes. So Sandra Bryant, who was just elected as the first African-American judge in Hays County, and her husband Ray Bryant. You, Dr. Westbrook, all the work that you do in the community, the work with the Kiwanis Club as the president, and also all the work, the service work you do in schools. Dr. Angela Osbrooks and Dr. Raphael Travis at the School of Social Work at Texas State University, who have taught me about what generative managing of people and community looks like. Justin Hardy, who's a friend of mine, he's a assistant professor at Arizona State University, focuses on child welfare and taking a look at fathers, namely fathers of color that are often forgotten and excluded in the process of the child welfare system, and has really inspired me in many ways. Dr. Ronald Johnson, who lives here in Kyle, who's a scholar at Baylor and spoke out today in Spectrum News about the importance of African American history in schools and how that is a potential slope to disempowering African Americans in our community. Maddie Welch, who couldn't be with us here today, but obviously is the first city council member of the city of Kyle, at a time in which overcoming prejudice and overcoming generational history of lynching and slavery she's incredibly courageous and brave to step into that space and expose herself to that kind of leadership.
All right, I'm gonna stop you.
Okay.
Because I said one.
One more.
Like I told
One more.
Miss April.
One more. One more.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
Dex Ellison, who was
Okay.
on city council here, who started
Yep.
this forum. And so I guess I wanted to maybe put the conversation on, there's so many heroes today, right here, right now, in our community. And we can look to the present and look to those achievements to know that we have leaders that are resilient and strong right here in Hayes County.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Miss Rebecca because she keyed us off by talking about Michelle Obama, who's alive and well and here with us to this very day.
Right.
So, very good. Thank you. Miss Wilma? And then we're coming back to you, Reverend Bell. Okay. I haven't forgotten.
I was sitting here, and when Kayla talked, because I chose Harriet Tubman also, and basically for the same reasons, that the woman was fearless. Also, she had a great abiding faith in the Lord, so that appealed to me, because I too thought about different people like Dorothy Height, because we would have the same birth date, not date, but day. And I've always admired her for the things that she did, and Sojourner Truth. But then I settled on Harriet Tubman because of her fierceness. And like Kayla said, she escaped that brutality of being enslaved, but she came back for her family and for her friends, and she took people. She never lost anybody who she took out of enslavement. You know, she basically founded the Underground Railroad, which got people out. She led the raid on what is that place? Some ferry no, it wasn't Harper's. It was some kind. I forget the name, but it's somewhere in South Carolina, where she liberated over 800 people, enslaved people. So she was just so fearless, and she also, and after the war, she started doing women's suffrage.
Yes.
As Kayla said, it's hard being a black woman in America now, so you know how hard it was back in the 1800s. So
Okay.
Harriet Tubman is my woman.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. All right, Reverend Bell.
You know, that was a hard one for me because I guess when you get up in age, you have a lot of them that you can go back to. I'd have to actually say a gentleman in the Air Force, Chappie James. He was a black colonel in the Air Force, and he made a lot of things possible for black soldiers, Air Force, Army, and Marines. We had a lot of things going on in the military that, like I say, the prejudice did not go away when we went in the military. But this gentleman, Chappie James, he made life a whole lot easier for black military troops. Matter of fact, he was a colonel at the time he started making ways for the black troops. I had the privilege to re-enlist up under him in 1969 over in a place called Morón, Spain. And he was a 4-star general. So he was my idol, and he made a lot of things possible for black GIs. So I think that's the person I have to say I look up to the most.
Okay. And thank you so much. You've just given us a very new piece of African-American history in regards to talking about this 4-star general. I think, and I like to say, in saying that about what you just talked about, is our military is an area that we don't know a whole lot about. And some of the things that happen, as well as the men and women who have moved through the ranks and got into very high positions. And it's it's like a military thing. We don't know about it as civilians, but I think we should, because I believe that such things carry on into the general citizenship of our nation, of having our military men and women, many of them of color, who have gone on to take on roles of leadership throughout the United States military in all of the branches. So thank you for that nice piece of Black history. We appreciate that. All right. I'm going to look at our Mentimeter. And let's see, it says, okay, so viewing the definition of stereotyping, what assumptions about you were made based on your appearance that turned out to be wrong? Now, Rachel, can you read that? Because, girl, my eyes.
I can zoom in. Move some stuff around here. Okay, it's not letting me zoom in. That's
Okay, then you read it. That's what I'm saying. I didn't think it was going to get bigger. Yeah, read it.
all right. First one says that I was an angry black woman, unapproachable. Or let me put on the microphone. That'll help. That I was an angry black woman, unapproachable, uneducated. When walking in a store, the color of my skin seems to deem that I need to be watched and followed.
Okay,
As a woman, many assume that I have children or that I intend to.
okay,
Inability to purchase a home.
okay,
The assumption that I must have been a drug dealer because I owned multiple properties and cars instead of being a successful African American male.
okay. Thank you, thank you. And I think many of us can relate to that and say, yeah, that one I can definitely connect to. So I thought that was an interesting question because though we are talking about Black History Month, and a lot of times stereotypes are made of African Americans, but stereotypes are made of people in general, like women, short people. I'm 6 feet tall, so short people, tall people, people who are bald, people who wear glasses. So many times we get these stereotypes about this person looks like this, therefore they have to be that. And as the definition said, stereotypes in the majority of cases are not true. So I use that as the prompt to say, getting to know someone makes all the difference in the world. And I have actually had an opportunity where a fellow teacher, this was way back in the 80s, who said to me when we were having a faculty meeting, he said, I think we're getting a black teacher. That's what he said to me. I think we're getting a black teacher. And I said, okay, we're getting another one. And he goes, oh, wait, that's right, you're black. Now, it's not that he didn't know who I was or anything. He was so used to me that he wasn't seeing color anymore. I was his friend. I was his colleague. And so for him to say that, and then I had to remind him, I had to say, George, do you realize who you're talking to? And then he said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that, but I got his point. And he wasn't trying to be disrespectful. He had no longer saw me as this person that you would see across the street on the east side, but he saw a colleague who he talked with and worked with all the time. So my point of that is that the more we get to interact and talk to one another and have conversations and find out how much similarities we have, more so than differences, we're going to all get along a whole lot better. And that tends to happen when you put people on the same playing field, or when you show them that they have something similar, they're much more open to have a discussion with each other. Moms who have 5-year-olds can relate to moms who have 5-year-olds. Doesn't matter what color. They're 5-year-olds, and you need a break. And so talking to a mom who has a 5-year-old, you can relate to that person. Now, being someone who's single and don't have a 5-year-old, then you have something different, and you could be the same color or the same gender. That's going to be an issue because you don't have that commonality. So commonality is something that I think that can bring us together when we look at how we're more alike than how we're different. Not to say that differences are wrong, because differences is what make us who we are collectively as a culture and how we get to share and do the kind of things that we want to do. All right, I'm going to go to another Menti question. And this one, we still got a little bit of time. This one is about, oh, okay. I want everybody to take a part in this one that you're going to see up on the screen. And I'm going to read it to you. So Menti, if you just joined us, menti.com, and there is the code on the screen. On the first day of school, now this is a current event. This just happened. On the first day of school, the first day of Black History Month, Nyack, am I pronouncing that right? Nyac, it's like Mac, but Nyack. Nyack Middle School, which is up in the New York area, changed the menu that was publicly posted for the first day of Black History Month. They changed the menu from, it was Philadelphia Philly cheesesteak sandwiches, broccoli, and peaches. The company changed the menu to fried chicken, waffles, and watermelon to celebrate Black History Month. What's your thoughts on that? Again, a middle school, Nyack, it was in the New York area. The company, not the school, the company who supplies the nutritional meals and whatnot, decided to change the menu from Philly cheesesteaks, broccoli, and peaches to fried chicken, waffles, and watermelon. What's your thoughts on that? I'm gonna give everybody a second. All right. Oh, looks like it. Is everybody speaking? Mark, not Mark. Okay. All right. Reverend Bell, what's your remarks on that?
I figured you'd come to me first. You know, I have to take this because spending so much time in the military, I missed a lot of things that happened in the States. The change the menu from the Philly cheesesteak and broccoli and fresh fruit to fried chicken, waffles, and watermelon. During my tenure in the military, I got in a lot of trouble when they had Black History Week in the dining halls. There are certain foods that I don't eat because I wasn't raised on them. I don't eat them. Pig feet, watermelon, oxtails. I don't eat no kind of meat that have fat. So I went in the dining hall during Black History Week, and they were serving soul food. They call it soul food in the dining hall. I went in the dining hall, and they had, the cooks was a black cook, big white hat, had prepared all the food for Soul Food Week, and I asked, could I get a cheeseburger? And this cook got very upset with me. Here I have put all this time in to prepare a soul food dinner, and you come in and ask for a cheeseburger. And I told him, I said, I'll tell you what, when you get a chance, come over to the table and let's talk. Because I felt like I had threw him off because I didn't want what they had prepared for Soul Food Day. And I explained to him, I wasn't raised on that. When the preacher came to the house, my grandmother hid the breast because that's all I would eat. The preacher would come and eat up all the rest of the chicken, but she would hide me a breast. I didn't eat the ham hocks. I didn't eat the pig feet because I don't care for meat with fat. And I explained that to him. And he had a different perception about me. So I would come in the dining hall, oh, that's that troop that don't like soul food. What are you going to have for breakfast? Hey. So I've kind of had to learn what it was all about the soul food thing, because watermelon makes me want to gag. And he did not understand that I did not want watermelon being a black man. Mm-hmm. So that was the opportunity that black troops got to get a soul food meal in the dining hall, and I didn't want it. I didn't want to partake in it. So I was like, he kind of asked me what kind of, am I? And I kind of had to tell him, I say, I'm from Houston, Texas. They cooked it in my house. I just didn't eat it. So that's my perspective on, depends on who was preparing this meal, what they thought was. They might have meant to give a soul food meal to the troops or to who they were serving to at the school. Or it might have been somebody say, I'll show them. We never know from the source of which it came from what the tension was behind it.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that one.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's see, I'm gonna go to Rebecca. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is, as to when I heard this, is it, I just have questions, honestly. Is there like a point you're trying to go with it? Like, is it because of Black history and like the stereotype behind it? Is it just because, I don't even know, like, do you just want to make the kids fat? Or, I feel like the food before it was a good option. I mean, why change it? Was it the Black History Month that caused it? Like, do you see a stereotype behind that? I just want to know the meaning.
Okay.
Or maybe it could just be a different change. Maybe the kids wanted something different. Maybe, I don't know. I just want to know. I'm a little confused about that.
All right. Well, sounds like you and Ruben Bell have the exact same question. What was the motive behind it? You have more questions. Very good. And that's interesting. Two very different perspectives coming together saying, well, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? Okay, thank you. All righty. April.
Yeah, I have questions too. I need to also know, what is the background of that school? Is it predominantly Black school?
Yeah, it was a predominant African-American school.
Okay. So, because to me that goes back to intentionality, and it does. Some messages are just received differently, from certain groups. It's like people in your family. I can complain about my sister all day, but you should not. And that's just how it works. And so with that in context, I'm not as conflicted, because I was conflicted at first, because as someone who does enjoy some chicken and waffles, I might have enjoyed that, but I think the context is what it's for. I think they probably meant it to be a positive thing, and food is culture, and we're celebrating culture. Let's also not forget that. So I think that makes a difference. So with that being said, and knowing that context, I'm okay with it. Had it been maybe from a PWI and I wasn't sure what that intention was, I probably would have been a little bit more offended by it, to be perfectly honest. And I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. You don't have to say out loud.
Yeah.
But these are just my own personal reflections.
Okay,
from it.
that's what we want. That's exactly what we want. Thank you very much. Ruben.
Yes, well, I'm probably more offended than April is. My first thought when I saw that and read it is like, really? This is 2023? And I think we have more work to do, because I agree intentionality is important. But looking at the whole picture, and I could be wrong, but I think menus for schools are done well in advance. And 2023 is not the first year that we've had Black History Month. And so had that been on the menu from the beginning, I think that's different than them changing it, as you said. Them changing it, I think, is feeding into the stereotype.
Okay.
And that's my thought. I just like, we're still doing this in 2023.
Okay. Thank you. All righty. Kenneth?
My first reaction to it is just kind of interesting. Me personally, I don't even like watermelon, but
Sound like Ruben Bell.
yeah. I think like April said, food is part of culture. Like, there are certain things where, like their food like fits into a specific type of category or whatever, but I just think that like everyone, like all Black people, we're not all the same. Like, we all still have everybody, like, just speaking on everyone, we all have our own individual tastes and like what we like and what we don't like. It kind of sits with me a little bit, so it's just kind of a little bit weird, because I've been called racist because I don't like tacos, like traditional tacos, and like I don't like spicy food, so I've been like said, spoken to a certain way, or like called certain things because I don't like traditional stereotypical foods. But like I said before, everyone likes their own type of thing. So I think again, I don't know what the intentions were with the school doing that. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is like a little bit of an intentionality thing. And I think everyone just has their own types of tastes and things like that. So, yeah, that's my thing.
Okay. All right. Miss Wilma?
I'm with Ruben. Unless they change that menu for everybody they serve on that day, then it was intentional, and it was buying into the stereotype that African Americans eat fried chicken and watermelon. So no, I do think it was intentional, because I doubt seriously that every school they serviced in that district received that menu. They changed it on purpose. So it's offensive to me.
Okay. All right. And as I said earlier, this was the company, not the school. Yeah, no, I'm just telling everybody. It was the company who contracts with the school decided to change it up. And to give you more side of the story, the principal didn't even know that the menu was being changed until he started getting calls from parents saying, "What are you doing serving my kids watermelon and fried chicken?" And he was like, "Wait, what?" And so he started making calls. He had to call his superintendent's office. The superintendent's office got involved. The media got involved. And it was clearly something that the company did at that specific school. Questions were, why was this done? Was it intentional? What were you trying to do? So there were a lot of questions that were being asked. And the big thing was, the menu had already been posted for the month, like we know that schools are due, right? The whole week is being posted, and then all of a sudden the kids walk in and say, "Wait, this is not what was on the menu for today." And so it kicked off a really interesting discussion in this part of New York about, was this racial, was this stereotyping? Were they trying to celebrate Black History Month? Why wasn't there some chain of command? Who made the mistake? Who made the call? All of those kind of things came up. So when we look at the Mentimeter, Rachel, I still can't read that. Just read it for me. Just read it for me. Okay. Old eyes.
First one, offensive.
Okay.
Tone deaf. Someone said stereotypic. Assuming that all Black people eat the same thing should have been a thought-out menu that teaches about other cultures' ways of eating. And it's insensitive. If they had planned courses celebrating different cultural cuisines across the world, celebrating different times of the year, it would be an interesting way to highlight the food of different cultures.
Okay. Good. Good point. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Well, my, time passes when you're having fun. It is 8:30, and we're going to conclude our 2023 Peace and Progress Dialogue. I cannot thank each of you so much. I cannot give you the words to thank you for agreeing to be on this panel this evening and give us your perspectives, your thoughts. As I told you when I was asking you to join and when you signed up, that there was no wrong answer. We just wanted you to tell us your heart. And I think that we got that from each of you. I can't thank you enough for participating. We'll have another one in June for Juneteenth. Similar format, maybe a little bit different. Do think about it. But maybe not so much as you coming on the panel, but you get someone that you know to serve on the panel the next time. I've done many of these panels over the years with former Councilman Ellison, and the last time I did a panel, one of the things that I did was I challenged the community. You tired of seeing me up here on this dais? Well, come take my place. And of course, I've changed roles. So, which is, I guess it's a good thing. Hopefully, everybody thought it was. Audience, thank you so much for participating and sitting here, listening and being a part with the Mentimeter, as well as those of you who watched us online. And, what a great way to participate, sit at home in your jammies, and be a part of this also. So thank you all so very much for participating. If you haven't, speaking to everyone, if you have not had an opportunity in City Hall here in Kyle, we have a display from Simon Middle School. It's an art display. It's on the walls of City Hall, and the students were following the direction of their teacher, Tara Monroe, who is a teacher at Simon Middle School. And the theme was Perspectives of Black History. And the students have developed all kinds of wonderful pieces of art. And if you've not had a time, please come out to check it out. It's open during business hours while City Hall is open. And we have until the 24th because we're taking down the art because those pieces are going to a district art show. So we've got about a week left to come and check it out. We earlier this evening gave a reception for the students to come and enjoy cake and punch and show their parents what they're done. I think they all came. And all of the family, they all came too. Lots of people, it was really great. So I open that invitation for each of you to, come out and see the artwork for this month in celebrating Black History. Tomorrow, the city of Buda is going to have an event. Miss April is going to be the mistress of ceremony. Am I correct?
I am.
right.
I am. Tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m., come out to the amphitheater and City Park in Buda for our 4th annual Black History Month celebration.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Wanted to plug that in. We think of Buda and Kyle as sister cities, and so to have an event on Friday here, an event on Saturday there, we want to kind of keep that momentum going. So without further ado, thank you all so much for participating, and we hope that everyone has a good evening and go out and celebrate Black History however you like. Thank you. Have a good night.